And Matthew, this at a time in which the cost of living for ordinary folk out there is getting higher and higher. We saw a new record high for petrol prices at the weekend. I think it was 163.7 pence. And it's going to go higher. I think someone was asked this morning, how high is it going to be? I mean, it could be £2 a litre. Yeah,
and as well, on top of that, energy and gas bills could potentially go up another £1,000 a year in the next increase when it comes to the next energy price cap increase. I think fundamentally this speaks to the morally dubious position we're now in when it comes to oil and gas. We've got the US talking to the Venezuelan regime. They're also trying to push ahead with a new agreement with Iran. These aren't countries you want to be dependent on for such key resources. And underlying this, particularly when it comes to gas, is the fact that the UK and Europe has completely failed in our own gas production. We have massive amounts of untapped shale gas that could be used, could both lower prices in the longer run, but certainly, if nothing else, ensure our security of supply and not be so dependent on such dubious things as Russian gas, as the rest of Europe probably will be for the next decade. This is a failure of policy making on our own behalf, and now we're reaping the consequences of that.
And just very finally, Tom, there's a great cartoon in the Times today with Rishi Sunak sat in front of the fire, chucking, I think it's draft number 86 of a spring budget in the fire, because he's having to rewrite it so many times with obviously the cost of living increasing almost by the hour. How heavy is the political pressure from within the Conservative Party to really try and alleviate this cost of living crisis, particularly when it comes to tax increases? Because this is a cost of living crisis affecting large parts of the Western world, but we seem to be the only country in the Western world who has decided to up taxes at exactly the same time.
And it's an incredibly difficult political position for the Chancellor and the Prime Minister. Of course, they came under considerable pressure 2 months ago when the Prime Minister was under potentially the greatest heat of the Partygate scandal.
No pun intended there.
Very good. And many of the Conservative backbenchers who were wavering in their support were demanding that this government steps back from raising national insurance on businesses and on families. And yet, even in that heat, even in that moment, the government said, no, we're pushing ahead with this. And this is because, of course, they have committed this funding to the NHS. They've committed this funding to social care. This tax rise, in the view of this government, needs to come at some point. And coming nearer an election would potentially be even worse than coming now and having that change in this year, even with all the cost of living squeezes that go on. I think it's more likely there'll be a deeply inefficient move from the Treasury where they'll take with one hand and give with another in the form of extra subsidies. That seems to be the way we're going, and it's a chaotic ride, but it's the one that almost makes more logical sense.
It's extraordinary. Rishi Sunak, who is the Chancellor, who continues says that he is almost that right in wanting to cut taxes, is actually turning into Gordon Brown.